Here we are. We are live. Episode 187. Been a bit of a break, fellas. 2-3 weeks, feels like. So welcome back. You are now probably, if you're an Albion fan, which I suspect all of you are about to listen to the 19th separate podcast or rendition of who Roberto De Zerbi is. But it would be remiss of us not to at least throw our hats in the ring, giving you a little bit of background on the fella. So welcome. Adam, Craig, how are you?
Yeah, I've been better, but I've decided to join the ranks of the people that wanted to participate in the pandemic. So if I sound crap on today's pod, that's why I'm at the tail end of the COVID that comes for us all. But yeah, outside of that, wonderful, everything's great.
All good this side as well. Ready to get into some RDZ ball.
I enjoy that you decided to get the old COVIDs right as the new booster was coming out. So you decided, I'll just get natural immunity this time.
No, well, Joe Biden told me the pandemic's over, so I walked out of my house and immediately came down with COVID. So I'm not quite sure what happened there, but here we are.
Well, yeah, that'll do it. All right, so let's talk Roberto De Zerbi, shall we? So this pod is going to be a little different to the way we usually do it, because we've actually probably got some pretty detailed notes. So that makes a nice change, considering that we usually go live right after games and just kind of wing it half the time. So the structure is probably going to look a little something like this. We'll start with De Zerbi, the very beginning of De Zerbi as a player. And we'll kind of just go through what he did, how he got there, and what his management style has looked like with teams in Italy for the most part, with a little bit of Shakhtar peppered in as well. He didn't get a huge amount of time there before Putin decided to do what he did. So if that sounds good to you, fellas, we'll get started.
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
All right. So Roberto De Zerbi. Let's start with his playing career, which was not hugely impressive, but still he got himself about. Left-footed Italian player, obviously. He's got the pretty classic journeyman career, mainly across Italy. But he did make 253 appearances in his career. Most of them coming at Foggia, Catania, and Napoli. This was before Napoli were really, really good. He was utilized as primarily an attacking midfielder. And something I want to note there is how all of our coaches on Potter's staff, which we've talked about a few times, were all defenders. And yet our new manager is primarily an offensive one. The way he talks about number 10s, which we'll get into later on, is very passionate. It's a position he seems to be particularly obsessed with, given that he played it, and probably will play great importance in his reign at the Albion. Do you have anything else to add to the playing side, fellas? Anything you've found out?
I'm just glad he wasn't a very good footballer. I mean that with greatest respect, that he wasn't some like superstar footballer, because he's had to, and a lot has come out of this, especially after some of Souness's absurd comments that on TalkSport, which, I mean, come on. For me nowadays, if you were a very good professional footballer, you've probably then got a bit of an easy layup into a job. He wasn't good enough to get that, and he's had to go and prove himself at a variety of different places. And the idea being that he's moved on from job to job to job to job because he's done so well, because it's outside of maybe the Palermo move, and I'm sure we'll get into some of those things. Palermo are famous historically for sacking their managers almost immediately. They're sort of like Watford on supercharge. He's got better jobs each time. And it proves to me that we've got a guy who had to earn this all himself. And let's hopefully he goes and earns it again this time around with us.
Yeah, couldn't have said it any better. I think you're right. You don't have that unnecessary pressure of a Gerrard or a Lampard, considering that you're world class. So, like you said, he's done it I say the right way, quote unquote, but as in like he's had to fight for those opportunities and prove himself over and over, and coming through, I guess, the lower echelons of Italian football. We find him here, so yeah, he's clearly earned his stripes.
Yeah, poor Watford catching strays on a Roberto De Zerbi podcast. Wonderful. I think the other thing there is, and I think with, not just us, but it's been discussed quite a lot across many podcasts and different mediums, is that a lot of these top managers weren't top footballers. That a lot of them were average to poor. I mean, Jose Mourinho was a bit of a joker, wasn't he? Potter wasn't exactly pulling up trees with his performances. De Zerbi the same. I think really, with the exception of Pep, the really talented managers, and I'm not including Gerrard or Lampard in that because they're not talented managers. The really, really high class ones aren't generally great footballers, are they? Which is an interesting. I'm not sure where that correlation comes in and whether it is a case of they are having to come up from the bottom and learn kind of the hard way, which kind of maybe gives them a bit more appreciation for different styles and tactics as they come up.
Yeah, and he's had to reinvent himself. But I think we'll get into how his playing career has almost impacted his stance as a manager. And you mentioned that he kind of played in this basically a number 10 role in his career, and it seems like he was better than he ultimately got credit for. Again, I haven't watched Roberto De Zerbi play, or maybe I did when I was younger and I just didn't realize he was even playing. But basically, he sounds like this sort of mercurial, sort of deep striker, a number 10 role that would come back. And a lot of what's come out already, and a lot of the research, and I'm sure like the benefit of being isolated with COVID is I've consumed a vast amount of horrendous amounts of De Zerbi content. And Josh, I know you wrote a sort of essay on it in the background. And Craig, I'm sure you've done the same. But he basically, that's how he sets up his teams. He's all about basically creating a team that's got this kind of edgy, dogmatic number 10 style. It's a bit different. It's not the standard. And I think we're going to see some of that in what he's going to do at Brighton as well. And
he has a treasure trove of capable number 10s to pick from, doesn't he? It's going to be really interesting to see which ones fit his bill. So yeah, moving on to management, and let's cover his early career quickly, and then we can kind of dig into the higher ups. Obviously, the management side started similarly to his playing career. He started all the way down in Serie D with, and I'm going to probably destroy this name, Dartha Biorio, before he moved to Foggia, where he did win the Italian Cup. From what I can gather, this is kind of akin to that Johnston's Paint Trophy type prize down there, the Italian version. So he turned down 2 separate offers for better jobs at this point, which is also worth noting, Mr. Souness, that he turned down 2 better jobs at this point before ultimately being sacked just weeks later for disagreements over transfers. A lot of people have been really concerned with rumors that he's had disagreements with the board across different clubs. And it seems that this is the only one I can find with any real concrete evidence that he left due to disagreements with the board. To me, if you're turning down 2 better jobs and then being sacked a few weeks later due to disagreements over transfers, it sounds more like promises broken from the club, doesn't it?
It sounds like it, doesn't it? I think you can read into it any way you want, but there's clearly a conversation been had there that maybe he needs to be backed and he wasn't. So, I mean, we can sit here and speculate all day long, but there's clearly just those sort of bits. But like you said, it seems like an isolated incident and something for naysayers to grasp on more than anything else.
Let's also know, let's not get away from the fact that this it's not the same personality as Graham Potter. Well, for all their tactical similarities, he's a fiery Italian, quintessentially. I'm sure we've all seen the various little videos and GIFs of him throwing crap while he's on the bench at one of his various clubs that he was at. He is not going to be a pushover. And I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic at the club, and something that is in many ways we probably haven't necessarily seen since Gus, where we've got a bit more of an enigma that doesn't have that mindset of, geography teacher-esque personality. He's a madman in some ways, Bielsa-esque, but also has that fieriness to him. So I'm intrigued as to how that will unfold. I don't think it's just going to be a calm setup and everything's behind closed doors anymore. He's going to get angry if things don't go the way, and I'm kind of excited to see that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it, to see how they handle it. A club that did not handle his fieriness very well was that one that we were just talking about, Palermo. Generally considered not well at taking any kind of anything, really. They're just very reactionary. He didn't do very well, though. 7 consecutive defeats, despite what you say about Palermo, that's poor. And no single points at home in 3 months. Sounds familiar. Should be right at home here. He got beat in a penalty shootout in a home match against Spezia and was then sacked. Yes, Palermo are not the most stable club in the world, but this seems to be the only instance where you can note that Mr. De Zerbi failed, really, at a club he was appointed at. And from then on, he goes on to Benevento, Sassuolo, and Shakhtar, and hasn't failed since. So whatever learnings he took, which Graham was very keen to talk about learnings and things he was going to take from him, whatever De Zerbi has done there clearly worked wonders, didn't it? Because from then on, it seems to be nothing but to the moon.
Sometimes you got to get it wrong, right? You live and learn, and all of those learnings and all that nonsense we talk about. But they, like you said, there's clearly something as in a learning experience, and like you said, something clearly happened there to sort of shift his mentality or his focus towards what he needs to do. So, not worried about that in the slightest, obviously, because he's gone on to bigger and better things and shown what he's capable of. But yeah, sometimes you need to fail.
I'm not going to judge him too harshly, honestly. Even with the results there, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Palermo managers between November of 2015 and January of 2017. So 14 months. There were 9 managers. Just so people have context when they look at this and go, "Oh God, he didn't do well." Yeah, 8 other guys didn't do well either. In as nearly as many months.
Is that a record, do you think?
It's incredible. I genuinely. There was one guy that was there from. they had 4 guys. One was there from Jan 2016, fired Jan 2016. The next one came in January 2016 and was fired in February. The following guy came in February and was fired in February. Then the next guy was February and out in March. So they just basically fired 3 guys in the space of a month. So yeah, that's how Palermo will run, and still kind of are.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, and this may be a bit controversial. Aren't Palermo and the Mafia interlinked as well?
Well, I wouldn't.
We'll have to be careful here.
Yeah.
I believe they are, though. No. Didn't Palermo get a bunch of point deductions at the same time as Juve and all the others? And they're the biggest team in Sicily. I'm pretty sure they are. And I'm pretty sure there's probably some sort of correlation there between the unrest and whatever else was going on.
Well, it wouldn't shock me. I suppose
Adam up in New Jersey, knowing he's about 20 minutes away from.
Yeah, I've got. There's probably a couple of ex-Palermo guys up here that will come and get me at the local deli, so I've got to be careful. Yeah.
Swiftly moving on. So he takes almost a year out of football, and then in October of 2017, Roberto De Zerbi was appointed manager of newly promoted Benevento in Serie A. Despite the side being relegated back to Serie B almost immediately, and we have some stuff to talk about here that's a little bit concerning. He was pretty much widely praised for his possession-based attacking football. His transfer business was seen as very astute. He was really given the Eddie Howe treatment in Italy. He was kind of the Eddie Howe of Italy at that point. He was managing a Bournemouth-esque team and got relegated, but was really came out of it better looking than he should have. Something to note here, which I found really interesting. 56%, this is, I don't think there's any more ever than this. 56% of his goals in that season were conceded via the counter-attack. If you want to understand just how many players he likes to get forward in an attacking format. Kind of scary, knowing one of our key weaknesses as a Brighton side. Not great, is it? That stat. Does it worry you a little bit?
Yeah, it really does. There's a lot to get excited about for this managerial signing, and I know we'll dig into more around our overall thoughts around this once we kind of get off De Zerbi's, this is your life. But there's quotes out there of his teams can't defend and they get counted on constantly, and his attacking play is too intricate. Stop me if you've heard that before. That's slightly terrifying, especially just given some of the differences between the games, the game type and style in Italy and in England. Like, teams will counter you like crazy here. Let's see. I'm hoping the good aspects and the extra, hopefully, goals that we create and the even heightened possession that I would expect us to have outweigh the downsides of being caught on the counter. What I do want to talk about in a bit, though, is how our squad and some of the players fit in with this new play style, because there might be some players that we've relied upon for quite a while at the club that might not be the best fit for this new, slightly tweaked style of football, especially in defensive areas. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it as well, is that you need to look at the personnel at his disposal, like especially during those sort of bits. And is it obviously wary and a bit of a terrifying stat around the counter attacks and being able to be so easily countered, because we've seen that before. But again, it's all around how he uses the current team, and we have very good defenders at this club. So, from that perspective, how much of the onus will be on the quality of the players as opposed to the system. But I will obviously get into that a little bit more. But it's obviously concerning to hear. But again, we've had issues with counterattacks for a while. So it's just more,
and we're still fourth in the league.
Right.
So, we can get around it, hopefully.
Yep. So the first thing to talk about here is just, and this is going to be a continuing piece throughout the rest of this podcast here, is the character of Roberto De Zerbi. Upon relegation, Benevento could not keep a lot of players. They were punching way above their weight as is, similar to a Bournemouth type side, really, without the cheating Russian owner. They were really struggling. So they had to let go of almost half of their playing squad at the end of the season. Various fees and players went on to do some pretty good things. De Zerbi resigned at the end of that season, as opposed to allowing himself to be sacked to save them money. This is a man that's just been relegated from Serie A. He has no guarantees of another job. And he decided to do that because he felt that was best for the team. And something you're going to see now throughout the rest of this podcast as we get into really what we would probably consider the meat of his legacy at Sassuolo and Shakhtar, that we can really use to look at what Brighton are going to do. We're kind of at the end of the This Is Your Life segment here, and we're going to get into the real kind of serious stuff of what he can provide to the Albion. But that character and that just morally right viewpoint is something that you're going to start seeing now kind of leak through almost all of his tenure at both sides, which is pretty cool. He was not out of the job for too long, though. Sassuolo swooped in on the 13th of June and was appointed manager. So under his tenure, they were, again, just like Benevento, very much praised for their style of football. Again, sound familiar? They had some pretty overachieving results. Again, sound familiar? And led a rather small club compared to many of those in Italy, right? / on the south coast of England, to 2 consecutive 8th place spots in Serie A. He only missed out on the super quality Conference League to Roma, Jose Mourinho's Roma, by the way, just due to goal difference just 2 years ago. So this is a guy that came in and started overachieving from the word go. We can really get into now what his style of play looks like, what he required at Sassuolo and onwards. And by this point, I would say, whatever we list off, this is a perfect time to start really linking in how this pertains to Brighton and what we're probably going to start seeing player-wise, personnel-wise, and what that kind of interaction with the players is probably going to look like. Let's start with the key piece. He's very particular in his requirements for a team, and this is very Gus Poyet like. He wants to see his teams play in a very specific way, but here's the key piece here with certain managers like Sami Hyypiä, for example. He will always show a willingness to adjust to his players' abilities, to his strategies. He's not someone that will put square pegs into round holes. He's not confined to one particular formation, but has a very specific ethos throughout the squad. And that ethos is possession and control based. Game plans, very much playing in the opponent's half. That's something that is a staple throughout. Relies on movement and short passing, building from the back, which is very, very important and very Gus-esque. I feel like Kasper Ankergren somewhere is wishing he was still capable of playing. And he's just very, very intentional about overcrowding the offensive third with as many players as possible. Something we've noted for a while that Albion really struggled at.
Yeah. His style, and I know you mentioned he doesn't necessarily, can tweak things. At Sassuolo and then at Shakhtar, is pretty heavily used 4-2-3-1, right? And specifically this double pivot idea, which basically we've kind of been using between Mac and Caicedo to sit in front of a grouping. He did play a little bit of 3-5-2 at Sassuolo as well, but yeah, his whole premise is to be an attacking team that possesses the ball high up the pitch. But the other piece of that is all about defensively inviting on pressure and creating the ability to get the team to move up the pitch. So there's going to be a lot of instances, especially when the team is learning the style of play, where our hearts are going to be in our mouths, because you are going to see a lot of passing around the back. Robert Sanchez is going to be pushed way out of his normal space towards the line in the 6-yard box. He's being pushed up. He's going to be involved in possession. And we're going to be doing things that probably make us feel a little bit uncomfortable when you go, why are you not just lumping the ball forward? What are you doing? You've got 4 Man City players rushing at you and they're just passing it around the back. We'll see a lot of that. But from a possession standpoint, I know we've been spoiled by Potter's possession, but we're going to probably see, the hope here is possession with more purpose. Like, his teams aren't afraid to take shots, at least historically. Yes, they'll have the ball high up the pitch. And in 2020, his team had the most possession in Serie A. That's Sassuolo in Serie A. Just to give context, Sassuolo's population is about 40,000. Their stadium seats 21,000. Half of the town of Sassuolo fits in the stadium. They're a tiny team. They don't have the backing of all of the Serie A teams around them. Monumental to just say that you come in and within a season, your team has the highest possession in the league. It's going to be an impressive thing. And hopefully we see a lot more goals as well with this play.
And I think that's the key bit that Josh also mentioned as well, is just being able to hit the ground running and being able to put your imprint on this team as quickly as you can. I see when everyone's read all the media by now, but it's almost like a tailor-made appointment for us because of the similar ethos that Potter and him share to an extent. But we have to give it time. Like you said, we need to give the players time to adjust to this and be able to do that. But from his Sassuolo days, to be able to go from one season to the next and have such a radical impact on a team and be able to change the way they play and the way that they act is really impressive. So whilst half of me is saying, oh, let's give him time and let's reserve judgment for a while. It seems that he really sort of picks up from the word go and is able to change things pretty quickly. So that's exciting from our perspective. And again, small resources, overachieving, that sounds pretty familiar. So again, that all seems to fit in and as to what a good appointment this is.
And to add to the possession stat, they also had the highest pass accuracy in the division, 90% pass accuracy under Roberto De Zerbi. We've actually made comment on a few different pods recently of what our pass accuracy looks like. 90% is not just outlandish, but almost like it feels unachievable. So it's going to be very interesting to see what he achieves at the Albion with that kind of impressive display of numbers behind him. And that double pivot is going to be something that we're probably going to talk about a fair bit throughout his time here. He developed Locatelli from being just a guy to being really a pivotal role model for Sassuolo and half of Italy at this point. He was averaging 77 passes a game with a 90% pass accuracy. And over 70% of those passes were forward passes. That's also insane. And you also feel that, you know, when you're looking at players within the Albion setup, like you said, with Caicedo and Alexis already doing some of this, that almost feels like a role that Alexis McAllister has been born to play. And something that Graham has unknowingly been grooming him for the past 6 months, doesn't it? It feels almost quite insane that we've got a guy in that seems to be fitting Alexis's progression to an absolute T.
In his first interview with the club, I'm sure you've all watched this, but he was asked, how well do you know the players? And I know he said a lot of times, like part of the interview process, Bloom's come out and said this, Paul Barber's come out and said this. Like he came in really impressive, like with his knowledge of what our team is and their strengths and weaknesses. But he named some players in that interview. And just in case you didn't pick them up, the first player he named was McAllister. And then he went through and said, I know McAllister, I know Welbeck, I know Caicedo, I know Trossard, March, and Gross. There's a couple of players he didn't mention there, namely sort of the stalwart captain of the club, who's, quite important to the team. He only mentioned players that I would classify as our sort of most technically gifted players. That should tell you everything you need to know about who he is and what he's going to look for and who's going to thrive under this system of his. And there's a reason why in his days at Sassuolo and then at Shakhtar, he favored the players that were the technically gifted ones. He even moved over Marlon, the Brazilian central defender from his time at Sassuolo. He purchased him over at Shakhtar. That's the kind of player he wants. And as you mentioned, like he made an incredible player out of Lorenzo Pellegrini, who's now, superstar for Italy and Juventus. Raspadori, who just had the fortune of scoring against England, Sassuolo youth product, who came into his own under De Zerbi. You've also got a couple of other players in there that I'm trying to. Who's the right winger who's really impressive? Berardi. There's a bunch of players that he's managed to make impressive, but they all fitted a certain mold. McAllister, Caicedo are the two players I think I'm most excited about under De Zerbi.
Yeah, a nurturing of talent as well, being able to get the best out of these sort of players that come through. Again, with that sort of, I guess, tighter budget restrictions, if you like. But yeah, just you're spot on. I think he's going to be looking for a certain type of player and work in a certain way. If your pass percentage is going to be at 90%, you need to have some very technical and very good passes of the ball in order to achieve that. So the double pivot is going to be obviously vital, I think. Like Josh said, it seems tailor-made as well, given the progression that McAllister has made in that role as well, alongside a emerging Caicedo out of the blue. So yeah, exciting, but I think he's going to be looking for those types of players. And we saw Bloom come out and say that, he will be back to an extent in January if we need those players in. I wouldn't be surprised if they're incredibly technically gifted players, first and foremost.
Yeah, Very much so. If this next bit sounds like I'm outright reading off a screen, it's because I am. I took a shit ton of notes. So the important thing to note for his formation and how important these two midfielders are, it's his unusual 4-2-3-1 scheme that he's come up with. And this is developed since Benevento. And I think it's probably trying to help combat that counter-attack situation, which hasn't helped massively, but it has helped some. So he's really transformed the way fullbacks support up front, which is going to be very interesting with the amount of very attacking fullbacks we have on the Bucks. He uses them very differently. While helping with retaining possession, with ball progression, all that good stuff, they won't go too far up anymore. His fullbacks do not generally go too far up the field. With a 4-2-3-1, and if anybody's played Football Manager or even FIFA, you'll know this. Fullbacks are pretty important in that formation. They generally overload as much as they can out wide. And they don't do that under De Zerbi. They don't generally enter that final third too often at all. It's something that they provide ball progression rather than actual attacking actions. And here's the really interesting bit before we get to the actual midfielders themselves. This leaves wingers almost always inverted, with the responsibility to provide width in the advanced areas. So this is a team that doesn't really have many out-and-out wingers, few fairly capable wing-backs, but Potter generally hasn't ever used attacking wingers or had need for them. We're quite lucky to have brought in Mitoma, which inadvertently is a great option at this point, it feels like, along with Trossard playing out there lately and thriving. But it's going to be a lot of responsibility on those wingers to attack and provide width in the advanced areas. And that's where that double pivot in midfield comes into action, and those centre-backs are going to be really tested. They are responsible for cutting through defenses with quick passing with the centre-backs. They are responsible for exploiting midfield gaps. They're responsible for providing the ball to those inverted wingers, the much beloved number 10 or the striker. And using this method, it actually allows up to 8 players into the attacking third. Hold your breath there, Amex attendees. You're going to shit your pants a fair few times, I think. But what makes their attacking actions that successful is the high number of shooting efforts. No more frustration at not shooting, I think. 13.74 shots per 90, which come from both outside the box and from a close distance. That increases their versatility in the advanced areas and helps them break in through different defensive structures, depending on whether they're going against 2 or 4 at 3 at back. And this is something you've honestly seen Pep Guardiola work on in the last 12 months. Quite a lot, actually. You've seen a lot of his fullback methodology change in the last season and a half. And something that is not a coincidence, given that Pep has noted that he uses some of De Zerbi's experiments at a higher level to see how he can hone and cultivate those. And they are kind of besties, aren't they? So there's a lot of responsibility there for that midfield and centre-back group. And it will be interesting to see how those fullbacks adapt, given that, he's trying to stop being hit on the counter as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm also really excited about Welbeck, because he took a relatively sort of semi-journeyman 30-plus forward in Francesco Caputo in his time at Sassuolo into a pretty mean goal scorer. So hopefully the hope here is that we can finally stop saying, when are we going to get in a position where we actually funnel goals to our front man? Hopefully that's now. But yeah, I'm intrigued about the winger situation, because obviously on the left-hand side, we're sport for choices. The right-hand side, right winger position, even now, we actually have to have someone purpose-built for that. Again, we go back to is that solid game in, game out, 90 minutes a game? And if it isn't, who is it? Can we bring in a Mitoma and have him sit on the other wing? Or can Trossard play on the other side? We rarely ever see that. So I'm wondering whether he's already eyeing up a position on the right wing in the January transfer window. The other part is who plays in, if we do move to fully a back four at this point, who's the old man out there? And immediately my thoughts go to saying that, well, you've got Estupinian in left back, who I think is going to be really good in the system, technically gifted. Is going to play that kind of sit back role really, really nicely. I think he'll be great. You're probably still going to stick with Duncan Webster. I'd be shocked if you don't. And then I would imagine Veltman plays on the right, which means Lamptey again. Is he just come in to spell Veltman out every now and then? So that's another part for me that I don't know yet, and it remains to be seen what happens.
You think Lamptey gets the Bale treatment, gets pushed further forward?
That's what I was thinking too.
He doesn't have a shot on him though, and like he's no Berardi. Like he's not going to contribute goals unless he changes his game. So I don't know if he will, but I don't know if he
competed with though. Solly March.
Let's not get started on that. Yeah, do we need a right wing goal scorer? Right? Who is that?
I think Lamptey at 90 minutes as a marauding wing back, he runs out of steam pretty quickly. And I guess when we're talking about this sort of wingers stay up and they keep up, I don't know whether he can be more explosive over a longer period of time, given that he doesn't have to track back for 90 minutes. So yeah. But this is all stuff that I think you're right. I think the right winger position is something that we'll probably be looking at in January, regardless of how the next 10 games go. Keep a close eye on the World Cup, see if anyone emerges out of that, like some sort of FIFA January transfer window, and then we'll see how that goes. But again, it's all up to those sort of players and making their mark and understanding. And we're talking technically, but also who's going to buy into his philosophy quicker, to make that move and to make that their own. The reality is that everyone's position is now up for grabs again. You can't rest on your laurels. You have to impress the new guy and his team. So, we'll definitely see. I think, but you're right. I think Veltman goes to right back. I think you keep that four, and like we talked about the double pivot, but Welbeck as well. Yeah, the Caputo situation and what he's able to get out of and be able to sort of use him to his best of his ability. I'm excited for that. Like you said, he was explicitly called out in his first interview. So, that seems like that's going to be the ploy.
I'm intrigued about Gross as well. I don't know what you think about Gross, Josh, because he's obviously been in fantastic form. He's going to be playing pretty far up. Like for me, he's the guy that sits centrally right behind Welbeck in that 4-2-3-1 if we do move forward with that. And interestingly, Kevin Prince Boateng, who played under De Zerbi at Sassuolo,
KP, my guy,
the infamous Kevin Prince Boateng, who earned himself a transfer to Barcelona. If you remember that sort of weird moment that happened in our relatively recent history from his time playing there, and
I adore KP.
He came out and said about De Zerbi. He said he puts him above other top coaches he's worked under. And Kevin Prince Boateng worked under Jurgen Klopp at Borussia Dortmund and Allegri at Milan. So keep in mind, Boateng is pretty much like De Zerbi probably looked at him and said, I can make you something amazing. You play that number 10 role. That's all what I'm about. Which makes me excited for Pascal Gross, what he can do with him, because we know there's never an issue with Pascal Gross's talent. Kevin Prince Boateng wasn't the quickest guy in the world either, but technically very, very good. So if you're Pascal, you've got to be pretty pumped.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You think about Pascal getting better as well. I mean, given his start to the season, Sorry, Josh.
And it's the role he thrived in though, right? Like under Houghton, like he was the only attacking threat we had at times because of his technical ability. He's never been the quickest. It's not like he's having to adapt to no longer having the speed. He never had it. And I think that, Kevin Prince was quick back in the day, the Pompey days. He was a lightning player in all shapes and forms. Like he was an enigma of a guy, right? But he's had to adapt, and probably De Zerbi helped him with that, and probably why he has such high praise for him. He helped him adapt to what age does to everyone, right? Father Time took over. Pascal doesn't have that. He's already over that hump, which makes it even more exciting, I think, for what he can do in this team. I mean, he's technically brilliant, isn't he? Like that's what we talk about all the time. That pass to lay off to the goal for Trossard. And just about everything he does. I mean, he rinses top fullbacks every other week with a simple gross turn. Like it's the most basic shit, and yet he sends people like to the hot dog stand. So you would think he will be very, very excited, for sure. I am going to derail a little bit because Stephen Mitchell in the chat has an interesting question. Have we hit the jackpot getting De Zerbi, especially with the last few days of England fans and the majority of the media now really starting to pick up steam, with Southgate likely out of a job by the end of Qatar if it goes as poorly as it currently looks like, and Potter being the favourite to take over. I don't think Potter will take over, for what it's worth. I don't think he will. I think there's way too. I don't think that England could afford him at this point.
But if he didn't move,
that's where I was going to go.
Yeah.
I was literally about to say, but they sure as shit could afford Brighton's salary.
Yeah.
So by this point in time, come January, does De Zerbi already have a job? Probably, because Juve were after him.
He turned Bologna down as well, right? Already, and yeah, Juve, because Allegri's on the hot seat.
Yep. So I mean, to answer the question, Stephen, I think we have. If De Zerbi is everything we hope he's going to be, right? Yes, I think we have hit the jackpot, because I think, barring a last 8 World Cup, I think Southgate would probably have been sacked for Graham Potter. Whether he is now, no matter how he performs, because Potter and Howe are neither available, they may well just not dare to get rid of him because they've got no one else available. But then if he had stayed with us, I mean, like Adam said, I think that's the key point, and I think he would have been gone. I think no doubt about it. I think they'd have saw the writing was on the wall and thought, why not? We've got 4 years until the next World Cup. Let's get him in. We can afford him. And he gets what most English managers consider to be the pinnacle of their game. So, yeah, if De Zerbi is everything he thinks he is and everything we hope him to be, I think we probably have hit the jackpot at kind of perfect timing for Potter to screw us over in the way he did, with the rapid exit. I think it's probably worked out for the best.
Yeah, I wonder if we were going to go back and touch on any of the wounds from the Potter move at some point. But yeah, and the other impending wound being Southgate. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say at this point. I'm a Southgate outer even after the Euros, because I thought he was an absolute chancer with the way he played. I think we got a bunch of favourable luck that came in there, easy games against sides that were at the end of their cycles, especially I'm talking about, the Germanys of the world. And I think he's a terrible coach. And I'm scared about Qatar. So saying all that, I'm sure we end up getting to the final or something like that. But it feels very like Mourinho's Roma winning the Conference League, second mention of the thing. Like, let's try and play with, and I hate this term, but I'll say it. Let's try and play with a low block and then score on the counter with our pacey wingers and see what happens and win every game 1-0. Like, come on. I think that's why we're so fortunate as Brighton fans in recent memory. That Bloom and Co have set out their stall to bring in managers post-Houghton era that play football the way it should be played. And it sounds cliche, but we as fans, we will watch because we want to be excited. We want to see the best, the technically gifted players. That's why Brazil are always so popular to watch their exciting team. Maybe you don't always get the perfect results, but we watch it because it's the beautiful game, right? We've been blessed with that under Potter. That's why they brought in De Zerbi, because he's the kind of guy that can combine technically gifted players and the beauty of football to get results. Southgate's the bloody antithesis of that, so I've gone on a rant. But he annoys the hell out of me because we've got a talented squad and he just sort of almost like just tries to bring out the most drab, effective, boring, pragmatic performances possible. And he's failing at that as well because, I mean, he's still playing Maguire. Anyway, De Zerbi, great. Southgate, horrendous.
I've got an interesting question for you both. Craig, you can answer this one first. We're going down an England rabbit hole here, but I just want to ask real quick. If plan A had gone to plan, do you think we do better, worse, or the same at the last 2 international tournaments with Big Sam in charge?
I think we do any better. I think I'm the same as that. It's just boring football regardless, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, I don't like him either. I was just curious what you thought about Big Sam.
I mean, it's just the track record, and yeah, I think Adam put it very, very effectively with Southgate, and sort of echoes my sentiments as well. But Allardyce isn't the answer. There's no sort of answer at the moment, unless you do go with a Potter or something like that to completely revolutionize the way that they're actually doing things. Yeah, it's a very talented squad, but just the wrong people in charge, and they continue to select the wrong people.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, I agree. I think me and Adam talked about it one time before we were recording, and I'm absolutely convinced we'd have. I agree with you both. I think we'd have won one of those tournaments without Southgate in charge, not Big Sam in charge. But if we would have brought in like Mourinho said he wanted the England job at one point. If we'd have had Mourinho in charge against Italy at the Euros, we win that. We win that cup.
Yeah, he would have had a field day.
Yep, it wouldn't have been nice. Wouldn't have been nice to watch either. But he would have won it. And I think that's the key for me.
Well, you can be a boring, pragmatic coach with like negative football if you win. Like you got to win. It's got to be worth it. I don't care about getting to the final and then in some ways embarrassing, like by just being pathetic. Like that's not. I know we got to penalties. I know all of that, but like unless you come home with the trophy, don't bore me with your negative football. Like have a go and then go home early. I'd rather that. I know a lot of people would disagree. It's just, yeah, it's silly. To bring it back to De Zerbi, back to the other bit, the other job like that. We talked about Bologna. He recently turned down that job. Bologna is a decent job in Italy, middle of the table side, but I'm sure he could do something that's a better job than Sassuolo. And he's an unemployed guy prior to the Brighton job. And he turned that down because his mate Siniša Mihajlović, who was the Bologna coach, has leukemia and was dismissed. And he basically said, "I'm not gonna take that job off after what they did to him," and fired him for that. So it shows you the character of the man, that he's not this kind of, despite what other people in the press might say about this, maybe he's a mercenary and he switches jobs and he causes a fuss and falls out with people. That's the character of the guy. Like, clearly, he's a good person, and he's going to mean well about what he's going to do. And that's, again, another Bloom and Barber thing, right? Potter, despite the exit, seemed like a good human being. More of that, please.
Yeah. I mean, well, we're at Sassuolo, and we have got 3 jobs turned down, 1 voluntary resignation, and we haven't even got to the Shakhtar incident yet, which says everything you need to know about the guy. I think he passes the no dickheads policy that the club have with flying colours so far. And it really only just gets better from here. It's hard not to like him. Let's go opposite. Let's go totally counter to the low block bollocks that we see with England and Jose Mourinho and others. Sassuolo, as it happens with most attack-minded teams, which they very much were, their overcommitment to those advanced areas, sometimes having up to 8 players in that final third, which is just outrageous to me, often comes at the expense of their defensive performances, and something that he's struggled with for a long time, and it wasn't fully fixed at Sassuolo either. When you focus on those attacking actions as much as you do, obviously the counter-attack becomes a very viable option for teams playing against you. It leaves empty spaces. It causes defensive disorganization. It makes it a lot harder for teams to employ a marking strategy if you're way up the field. And generally, Sassuolo were not strangers to this issue. They saw it a fair bit. And it seems pretty clear to me that De Zerbi is, he relies on scoring more than you as his main thing. That would not always work, evidently, but it keeps his team on the front foot, keeps their enthusiasm to keep on scoring. It's a fun way to play. It's what we want to watch. We would rather watch us win 3-2 than lose, or win 1-0 if it was boring. I think you'd rather see those games than not. And whenever they need to trouble their opponent's build up, their press pass, their pressing defensive actions are insane. They are when they were in Serie A, they were above Juventus with their press and defensive actions. They were above the majority of that top group, really. They are just an insanely quick pressing team, which, again, echoes all the way back to Manchester City in the way they play currently. Very, very similar. And if you can get the ball back in the opponent's half, something that Potter's Albion this year especially have seemed particularly talented at, it's not going to be new to this team. There's going to be a lot of those fundamentals that this team are already good at and already familiar with.
Yeah, no, and that's, I know we keep saying it, we sound like a broken record, but there's no mistake why they had this guy earmarked. And I almost wonder whether he'd still be first choice if he was in a job at Shakhtar and the war hadn't been a thing. Because it's I don't know. I mean, outside of some of the other names that were thrown about, he just feels so perfectly made for a transition off of Potter, both from a pressing and a possession standpoint. But as we talked about a little bit, there are going to be some sort of subtle differences in terms of how we play. And there are going to be some players here that are either going to really embrace it, and there's some that maybe aren't going to work out so well. And I'm excited about the fact that we've got this relatively younger, more impressionable group throughout the squad. And I know we talked about the double pivot players, but with Mac and Caicedo, their evolution under De Zerbi could potentially be very, 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 very exciting to watch. And the way in which he kind of builds up from the back. I know we've a lot of focus on the attacking football around De Zerbi, but all of that comes from what you do once, Bob Sanchez maybe has the ball at his feet or in his hands. I'm going to be so intrigued as to what happens with our grouping right at the back there. Dunk, Webster, and Sanchez, to me, are the three that I'm going to look at and go, how are you going to get on in this system that he creates? Because it's going to be a bit of a departure from a five at the back where the ball gets sprayed out to the sides. This is different. Like De Zerbi brings 6 players back when the goalkeeper has the ball at his feet. So we'll have Sanchez, Caicedo and McAllister will come right to the edge of the box. The 2 centre backs will be right there as well. And then the left and right back will be positioned to the flank. So he'll have 6 passing options. Now, we all know we get nervous sometimes when Robert Sanchez has the ball at his feet. But what he is very good at is he smashes the ball up and picks out a pass from yards and yards and yards away up the other end of the pitch. There's going to be none of that. He will not be allowed to do that unless he really has a great pass on. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. Like, okay, pass out to Dunk. Dunk's got his, back to the rest of the pitch. Where's he going to play the ball? Like that, I'm already getting a bit nervous about that. Like, are we going to sink or swim in those situations? Like, for me, and how that all gets brought about is going to be really, really compelling to watch. And I will shut up in a second. But the other thing that I'm sure you've all seen bounded about is this idea that he makes teams kind of get baited into that defensive grouping. So there's these sort of famous shots that are going around about his defenders, his central defenders, literally putting their studs on the ball in this sort of like foot sound mentality. So they just stand there and wait for the attackers to come onto them and just like, all right, I'm not going to move. I'm just going to sit here. And that then obviously then baits an attacker to come in. Bam, you've got a nice little passing triangle out and you were up the other end of the pitch relatively quickly. That's all what he's about. And there's a reason why he's got really good results against some of the bigger teams in Serie A, is because those sides will press you like crazy. So you can work around that press. It's going to be fascinating to watch what happens when we play against some of those lower end of the table sides that we've struggled with in recent history as well, that will just sit back and they won't be baited into a press. How can we work around that? So there's a lot to look out for in the coming season.
And it's an education piece for the team, but also for the fans as well. We're going to be watching this and trying to decipher and understand what we're trying to do. And I think that's the exciting part of having a new coach in, with those new ideas, that new philosophy, that new mentality of how he wants this team to play. So are we going to feel super nervy and uncomfortable when Sanchez is being pressed 30, 40 times a game? Absolutely. But it's that cliche, trust the process, and that if this is the direction we want to go in and this is how we want to play, then those bait and switches are going to be amazing to watch. They're going to be almost as obvious as a gross 10 to us who watch it week in, week out. So, those sort of things where we're going to see something different, it is exciting. And the second part is, like you said, who fits into that philosophy. We're coming up to 10 games left before the World Cup. I said it before, but people and these individual players are going to have to leave their mark in these next 10 games. And that's where the excitement is for me, is that you're going to see people potentially up their game, or nut up or shut up, basically, in that they need to perform before this World Cup, before the January transfer window, because this guy has ideas and he has a very specific way of playing, and a mentality that isn't going to shift. So do you fit in, or is there radical changes that need to be made? I think that's what we're going to see in the next couple of months.
I think the defensive actions that you were talking about, the studs on the ball, the outright arrogance, right? Like, that's exactly what it is. It's almost like trolling to an extent on a football pitch. And I think that's where you, like, instead of looking at De Zerbi and how he's performed, because at Shakhtar, who are one of the biggest teams in Ukraine, easily, they cut through poor teams. Because the amount of time they sat on the ball just doing nothing, they couldn't help it. They had to press forward because it frustrated teams. And I think if you look at that from a Brighton perspective, that's how Poyet got so many good results against bad teams in League One. Kasper Ankerin would sit on that ball, and I remember being in the stadiums where, like, we would count the seconds, and like he would be up to like 24 seconds. And away from home, those home fans get mad, and poor teams have no choice. They really don't have a choice. That they either sit there and settle for a 0-0 where Kasper will just sit on the ball for 90 minutes in. That's fine. With Gus relies on us to win at home, and we were. So that's fine. That's 2 points per game. That's promotion. We'll just sit on the ball and do nothing then. And they hate it. And those smaller teams, I say that we're not exactly massive. Those poorer teams, they're going to have to react to that. You can't imagine, and I know they're not in this division anymore, but like, go to Turf Moor and pull that shit. See how long it takes for the Burnley fans to lose their minds and have those players being baited. It's going to happen. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think that we may well see an almost return to what should be expected. I think we're going to find it a lot easier to beat the poorer teams that set up very strong defensively. And I think we're going to find ourselves really at the mercy of some of these big sides coming up, especially in this next month or so. I think you're probably going to see a return to type where we're achieving exactly what we should do against teams like Manchester City. We're probably going to lose 3 or 4-1. But we're going to go to teams like Forest at the City Ground, for example, and we're going to win that by more than 1 goal for once. And I think that's probably what, with no other knowledge of what other than the bajillion things we've all consumed on De Zerbi, that feels like probably the more likely outcome here.
Yeah, the difference between the leagues is going to be very telling. And that old school Italian Serie A philosophy of defense first, which he is very much, the counterpoint to. He may well be in for a shock in the Premier League, because between the top sides now in this league, we're going to get pressed like crazy, and he won't have experienced that same level of press. Not even sides like Juve and Inter and AC do that, right? They're still very comfortable about sitting and waiting to win possession back and work their way out the pitch, or even play on the counter like Mourinho's Roma. Man City aren't going to do that. There's going to be 3 players running at Adam Webster once, he's trying to play a backwards pass to Rob Sanchez, who's going to try and chip it over to Estupinian, and then we're going to be surrounded. Like, there are going to be moments, especially in October, when the players are learning this system, De Zerbi's learning the league, and we're playing against some very strong sides in the next few weeks, where we are going to concede, and we as fans are going to look around and go, what the hell was that? There will be embarrassing goals where the players get used to this new way of really playing outside the back. Let's not forget, by the way, Potter played out from the back. Like, we've already seen this. Like, that's a big thing. We tried to do that. Now it's going to be on steroids. There's going to be a transitionary period where mistakes will be made. But yes, hopefully at the other end of the pitch, it's going to make it worth it, and there's going to be some fun games for us.
Yeah, like you said, there's a betting in time here as well that we know, and some fans will anticipate, is that like previously said, he has a somewhat track record of being able to get things going pretty quickly, but you have to remember this is the best football league in the world against some of the top sides in the world, and with a very different mentality, like Adam said. So you are going to be pressed like mad. You are going to be playing a different version of the game here that he hasn't seen before. If there's one thing you can say, is that a lot of his experience is based in one country. So he's very used to that sort of mentality and philosophy, or being the antithesis of it. So you have to give him time, just around what happens, get used to the system. And like I said, the onus is on the players in picking this up as quickly as they can too. In the let's try and get as many points on the board. But as Josh alluded to, we're into a very bad run of games at the moment against some very top teams. So does that help? Because we've got those sort of free hits where we're not actually expecting any points, or is this actually going to be a very bad run of games where we just can't see that progress or that change in mentality and play?
The other thing, Josh, you probably want to comment on this as well, but Barber came out and they've said multiple times that they know how tough this period is going to be. They know that there's going to be some betting in, as you said, Greg. This is a very much a long-term hire. I think they came out and said that someone asked about the contract. Like, did you guys offer a 3 and he negotiated you up to a 4, right? Because it's a 4-year, I think he signed. No. We just offered a 4-year. That's the mentality behind this club. This is not a short-term thing. They found this guy. They've done their research, and like we're in this. So even my expectation is we are going to, lose some of these games, and it might not be too pretty over the course of the next few weeks. I hope I'm wrong here, but there's not going to be any weird reactions from the upper echelons of this club. That there's an expectation that this will take time, and let's not forget there's a long-term contract signed. They're excited about it. He's brought in a whole coaching staff after Potter gutted this team. This is his team now, and this is also a team that has a healthy bank balance. So there is the ability for us to modify in January, as Craig mentioned earlier, and then obviously in the summer window as well. So we'll see some change, and it's going to be for the better, we all hope.
Yeah. Let's round off his career with Shakhtar. He announced he was leaving Sassuolo at the end of 2021 season. Moved over to Shakhtar almost immediately, was kind of announced as the new Donetsk manager, and won the Ukrainian Super Cup against Dynamo Kyiv pretty much immediately. First Italian to ever do that, which is a random stat, but I don't imagine there's a huge amount of Italians in the Ukrainian Premier League anyway. And then obviously Putin's war and invasion / tactical military operation, or whatever he pretends it is, interrupted proceedings, and he left. Well, the league disbanded basically for a period of time. And he left them top of the league, something they hadn't been for a little while. And a lot of his ethos really just transferred straight over from Sassuolo, as Adam said, 1 or 2 personnel as well. He had an awful lot more teams that viewed Shakhtar as a cup final every week, right? So you're playing against the biggest or second biggest team in Ukraine. A lot of those teams viewed it as their big day out, right, in Shakhtar, and he handled them pretty easily. His style just suited what was going on there. Looked very good. Champions League, not so great. He struggled a little bit there with the bigger teams, which then again begs the question: how is he going to adapt to Premier League ball with a lot of teams that play a lot of pressing football, a lot of very physical, quick stuff? It's going to be really interesting to see what he does and how he adapts. But I put together like a little TLDR at the end here for anybody who wants to skip all this shit and understand exactly what Albion fans can expect, and add anything on here if I've missed it. A pretty much full-time reversion to 4 at the back. a total overhaul in the way you look at fullbacks doing the work in this Albion team. Not going to be the same fullbacks you saw in the Potter era. A return of wingers and reliance on wingers, which is something we haven't seen in many a year now. Probably more of the same counter-attacking aches and pains, and much increased arrogance on the ball. A lot less instances of fans saying shoot, and a little bit of Pep Guardiola ball in the mix as well. A lot of Pep's new structures over the last 12 months have imitated De Zerbi's experiments at Sassuolo. He's had the luxury of having Manchester City at his disposal, which is nice. I think I've heard Pep say that Haaland reminds him of a young Caputo. So you should probably see something pretty similar. No, I'm joking. Obviously not. Expect more of that kind of once he gets bedded in and sorted out. And we've got through January, World Cup's over, and you're really starting to see that team take shape. You're probably going to start seeing on occasion more of that groundbreaking, wild stuff that possibly the footballing world has never seen before from De Zerbi, which is something that has been a bit of a staple throughout his time in Italy.
If I'll do a brief summary, but mine is completely stolen. James Horncastle, the Serie A journalist, predominantly, was asked about his thoughts. And he's done a bunch of decent articles, by the way, and stuff like that. But his tweet about when someone says De Zerbi at Brighton, what should we expect? One sentence: prepare for Brighton to invite pressure and play through it with elaborate passing patterns. So that's what we're going to see. And this is the only other thing I'll say, just for context, is this is a guy who once bailed on a press conference, a post-match press conference in Serie A with Sky Italia, because he wanted to go home and watch Bielsa's Leeds play on TV. And he got a lot of bad press about that. So this is a guy that's like proper brain trust tactics. There's that picture out there with him sat around with Guardiola and a bunch of the other sort of tactical minds out there as well. And I think De Rossi and a bunch of other people. He's in there. Yeah, Kolarov was there. Why not? But to me, outside of all the Pep comparisons, everything else like that, and for bad and for good, I think we'll see a bit more Bielsa here. Because what were Leeds famous for in their first season under Bielsa? Chaos. Like that chaotic, like, what's the scoreline going to be? I don't know. Let's see what happens. But they were fun to watch. Now, hopefully it's going to be a more contained version of that. And he's taken inspiration from the things that Bielsa has done well, but has a bit more of a formalized process behind it. But prepare for a bit of chaos as well.
It's just going to be, I mean, we've said exciting. It's just going to be fun. I think it's just, there's those sort of things, and the character that he is, and the quality team at his disposal as well. There is going to be some, like you said, some carnage and some fun to be had there. So just worth noting, we have 10 games until the World Cup. Let's not expect too much, but let's just see how this team starts to bed in. But if you're not excited, then you should be, because I think it's just going to be a lot of fun.
And just final note on his character, and I am just ripping this straight away from a news article, because it's really interesting though, like just how good of a dude this guy is. He refused to leave the Ukrainian capital before all of his overseas players had been taken care of and found their way across the border. He had no interest. Literally like captain on a sinking ship. He stayed all the way through, slept on the floor of a hotel, did whatever he needed to do, had no problems. He was talking to journalists and saying he was routinely woken up by bombs. Like, this guy is like no joke. Like, this guy is a hard ass. Like, he's not to be messed about with. And you're going to see that on the sidelines too. Probably a little bit like Jesse Marsh / Bielsa, fiery kind of passion. But it's really interesting. You should go Google it. Just his exit from Shakhtar. Again, like, it just goes to show what a good person he is. He quite literally risked his life to ensure that his players got out of that country before he did, in a manner he deemed satisfactory, which is just I mean, that's wild, isn't it? He had, I believe the Italian embassy basically like called him and like short of begging him to just come to the embassy and get the F out. And he told them twice no, like he's staying until the job is done. Which is just mental, really. It's hard not to like a guy who's that morally good.
Yeah, but Graham Souness told me he's not very committed.
Yeah. Mr. Souness of all people. Interesting. That about covers De Zerbi ball. I know you've all probably, like I said, consumed about 18 different outlets of this, but we'd be remiss if we weren't the 19th. So I hope you've all enjoyed it. For those that don't kind of consume a huge amount of other Brighton podcasts and media, I hope that you've learned a bunch more stuff about De Zerbi than you knew about before turning on the show. Do you guys have anything else to add?
All good for me.
I think we've done it. Now we just got to see the guy do his thing, huh? Let's see what happens.
First up, Liverpool. What could go wrong?
Yeah. Let's hope Prince Boateng was right, and he is better than Klopp.
I mean, they're a Liverpool team that are very low on confidence right now, very fragile, especially at home. And this is a team that are, as Craig said, there's going to be a lot of players wanting to advertise themselves to their new man, right? That they can do what he's asking them to do early days. It's going to be a very interesting game on Saturday. It's going to be a very interesting operation.
Oh, can I leave you and the listeners maybe with one hypothetical that is relatively unfair? There's obviously it's not been popular with the fans, that move overall at Chelsea. If Potter doesn't work out, and let's say he just gets fired, I don't think he will, but let's say he gets fired. De Zerbi doesn't work out here. You ever see Potter coming back?
I don't think you do. It's just like I said, I think there's still some slightly open wounds from the way he left and stuff like that. I think that's gonna evaporate anytime soon. But like you said, purely hypothetical. I don't think it would happen.
Yeah, I think when you hear Tony Bloom say something like, "I'm very disappointed he left" in a press conference, I mean, for Tony Bloom, if you like put that through a normal person translator, it's like, I was ready to blow his brains out. I'm so angry. Like, I feel like that wound is slightly more fresh and open than Tony will ever admit to. To me, I don't. Plus, I don't think you ever go back. I don't think there's any reason. He can go do whatever he wants to do. But I think he'll be given the season at least as well. Like you say, I don't think he'll be going anywhere until the end.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, just a thought. That's all.
What about you? Would you take him back?
Yeah, absolutely. If things didn't work out, well, I mean, he left the club in a better place than he started. Outside of the way of the exit worked, I can't hate him. For me, I can't hate him for taking a job that is, somewhat pinnacle of what you try and do as a manager. And the other guys that left with Bruno and co, sad. But again, they looked at this and looked at an opportunity to go and be a part of a side with pseudo and limited money playing in the Champions League. That's kind of what you work for. I think loyalty at this point, in many ways, these guys aren't fans. These are jobs. And people only stick in these jobs if they don't have better options for the most part. So I don't judge him too harshly. And I think he's a very capable manager and fit in here great. So yeah, my hope though is that he does all right at Chelsea. I mean, he's fine, but De Zerbi does amazing here. It's more just, if it didn't work out and things went the opposite way, would I take him back? Yeah, I would.
Do you think Bloom would though?
Yeah, I don't know. It's the ultimate question. Depends who else is out there and what the options are. But more likely being that if he doesn't work out at Chelsea, I think his name then gets probably crossed off for the England job, doesn't it? Even if Southgate is gone. So it's hard to say. It's too many hypotheticals, too many parallel universes.
Yeah, well, you asked.
I know. I've confused myself. It's an unfair question, Adam. Unbelievable.
You'll have to stump up £3 million a year as well to have him back. So,
after that, after he's killed his career at Chelsea a little bit, he's got to take the pay cut again. This is his penance. Yeah, pay him less.
Yeah, takes half.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Cool.
have a wonderful rest of your week, fellas. FIFA 23 is out this week for anybody who wants to get in there. I will be unapologetic in it. So we will be back next weekend. It will just be Adam and Craig next weekend. I will be unavailable. So we'll be back next weekend to discuss Liverpool day one of Roberto De Zerbi ball at Anfield. No pressure against a Liverpool team in much need of revival. That's going to be an interesting clash. But have a wonderful rest of your week, everybody. Stay safe out there.
Cheers.
Cheers all.